Hi everybody, welcome to today's latest video. I'm so delighted to be joined by Aileen O'Dwyer. Aileen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Una. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. So Aileen has a vast wealth of experience with a former teaching principal of 36 years and now into a different avenue of her life as being a life coach. So we have lots of different aspects to talk about today, but today's core topic hopefully will look at how to best prepare for people going back to school, whenever that may be. So that might be in a few months' time. We're not really sure what way that's going to pan out at the moment. So hopefully today we'll look at tips and tricks, both for parents and for teachers and people in the school context, but also people in general life circumstances to prepare for going back into, let's say, some form of educational institution. So Aileen, what do you think we should first address as our first main topic today?
Well, first, Una, I'd like to acknowledge the great work that parents and teachers have been doing during this very unusual time. Listening to parents and listening to teachers, they have all been trying to do their best and doing the best for their children. So it has been difficult, especially for parents who were trying to work and homeschool their children.
Yeah.
So I want to say to them, well done. You're doing your best. You are good enough. And I think
That's such an important point, really, because I know we were speaking about it as well, that people, obviously this has been a very challenging time and trying to do bits of homeschooling or anything like that while people are working from home, all of those different dynamics with trying to manage a family unit, or people maybe being on their own and trying to manage that unit, has been challenging. So it's really important to recognize where people are at the moment and that they've gotten through this hurdle, hopefully.
Yes, I agree with you totally. And I suppose for parents who have been teaching their children, and for me at school, teaching is all about learning. You learn so much from teaching children. You really do. And every opportunity is a learning opportunity. And you know, all children, all people are programmed to learn.
Yeah.
Because learning is about growing. And it's like a little plant, a little flower. If the plant stops growing, it begins to wilt.
Yeah.
And it's the same with us. We want to keep growing. We want to flourish. So to keep growing like the little flower, there are certain conditions that need to be in place for it to happen. Really.
Fabulous. Yeah, really, really vital. Like, we all need core essentials, regardless of what age you are. If you're a child in school or an adult, we all need core essentials day to day to help get us through, help to not only sustain us, but help us to thrive then. So help us to grow and help us develop. And what would you think some of those core essentials would be from your context, Aileen? So obviously you've had lots of different avenues of career paths as well. What do you think your essential ones are of advice to give to people?
Very good. Well, I suppose, as I said, every situation is different, and we all come with our own life experiences, and we all come with our own way of being and our own feelings. But as I said, there are core needs, and I suppose the first one is food, Una. You know, I always think of, there was a little boy in school and he loved talking about Lamborghinis. And one day I said to him, what would happen if you put bad fuel into that lovely Lamborghini that's outside the gate? We used to have great fun using your imagination. And he looked at me in horror and he said, I ruined the engine. And yet we often forget about the good, nutritious food. However, Una, I must say, if there are certain times of the day, if you put a good, nutritious dinner in front of me and you put my favorite box of chocolates in front of me, I have to say, despite my maturity, I will go for the box of chocolates. So I suppose the best thing we can do is leave the rubbish outside. And maybe give children a choice. Children need choice because that empowers them. It's lovely to have choice. So to have a choice of different types of food, have a choice of different types of good food, because the one thing that's necessary to make the brain work is good food.
Completely. Yeah, really important. And as you said, your own example, we're all human as well at the end of the day. You know, we all still like nice things, again, no matter what age we are, it's all still kind of, you know, either linked to us as a human makeup. It's just, I suppose, it's things that we like versus things that really sometimes don't really taste that nice. You know, we're not saying here that all the fruit and vegetables are always great and we should all just eat them, because that's not realistic. But I think it's really core, essential to also living, but from a learning capacity. So for us to learn and use brain power, we need fuel, and somewhat, as you mentioned with the Lamborghini, we need good fuel to help that growth from a brain development perspective.
Yes, yes. And also, Una, I noticed with the children in school who got lots of exercise, those children were alert and ready to learn. And there were certain children who went out in the morning and maybe cycled around the house or ran around the house for a few minutes, that when they came into school, they were really awake and they were clear in their head. It's like when we go out for a walk or taking children out to the woods and going for a walk in the woods, whether it's playing football, all these different types of exercises help. And there's a lovely program called Simple Literacy with a Dr. Emma Blake. And she has lovely, if you Google it, she has lovely simple exercises for children, little sequences for children to help, you know, because movement is so important. And both you and I have worked with Dr. Alwina Awan, and she has done a lot of research on physical literacy and linking physical literacy with learning, and how important it is for the body to be linked to the mind to help to learn.
Yeah, really, really important. And we'll be having Alwina on in the next hopefully week or two. She'll be doing a physical literacy segment, and how we can link in with that. So I suppose stay up to date on the page for us to supply that video to you. But as you mentioned, exercise, food, really, really core vital aspects, something that we need to always check in, and water and kind of nourishing the body to help it grow and develop are basic essentials that we all need. Adding on to those suggestions, what next comes to mind, Aileen, from your experience, I suppose, from a teaching background, of how you think best to prepare for going back into this particular different maybe context in the next few months?
Yes, you talked there about nourishing, you know, and when we think of nourishing, we think of food and exercise. But very important is to be kind, to nourish with kind words, and, you know, praise, well done, praise for what is done. And I suppose we all associate, you know, that lovely feeling with praise and encouragement. And yet there's also this thing about tough love, and about, you know, maybe we don't always do it right. And it's nice that somebody will support us when we're not doing it right. And rather than saying to a child, you are a messy child, say, you have a messy room. Let's tidy up the room together. So focus on the action rather than on the child. It's like the child who gets 1 out of 10 in the spellings. To focus on, you got 1, which means you can spell. If you can spell 1 word, you can do the process.
Really
so then what's the next step? Now the child will probably say, I want to get 10. But it's like the child standing on the edge of a puddle. You can jump over a puddle, and if you fall into the puddle, it's okay. So maybe aim for something smaller, maybe aim for 2, 3, and build up slowly. Whereas if you're standing at the side of a big river and you want to jump, to jump, you're going to fall in. And maybe sometimes the overwhelm is too much.
Really
Take
important.
whatever you're doing to take it in small steps.
Yeah, really, really good. And progress over perfection. I know something we've spoken about a lot. It's progress. So it can be baby steps, it can be bigger steps, it can be whatever steps you want. But it's progress. It's moving towards that end goal without having to be there instantaneously. And
Yeah.
that's the impatience level of all of us, both as kids, as adults, as any different age demographic. We kind of want to be there yesterday. But unfortunately, that's kind of not always the case.
Yes, and as you say, we want to be there yesterday. So it's where we're at now. And as you said earlier, it's about thriving. But to thrive, first of all, we have to survive and be where we are and work from wherever we are at. And you know, they say, Una, that it takes three positives, at least three positives, to get rid of a negative.
Mm.
So to put the attention on what we can do and let the energy flow to that, to what
Completely.
we can do.
And I think importantly, acknowledging the effort put in. You mentioned there about the 1 out of 10 in the spelling test. You know, obviously I operate in a space of learning difficulties, so it's not always possible really for them to get 10 out of 10 in a spelling test. And that's not really the goal or the desired outcome. But it's acknowledging that, yes, you got the 1 or you got the 3 or you got the 4, but the effort that you put in to actually learn off those spellings is what, let's say, should be rewarded. It isn't exactly the outcome score. It's really that you sat down or that you came up with a methodology to try and learn off that. And obviously it doesn't have to be a spelling, but it's the effort and the work that you put in to try and achieve that result is what we need to reward, both as teachers and all of those type of things.
Yes, and as you said there, Una, about the effort, parents will have realized and will also have valued the work that teachers put in during school time. Parents, I suppose, would have realized how challenging it is to get children to pay attention, to focus, and for to give attention and to pay attention is very challenging. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's not easy for any of us. And in this world of phones and technology, you know, sometimes it's better if we give children 10 minutes of our attention rather than an hour of attention with the phone. Because when we pay attention, we are listening to the child and we're hearing what the child is wanting. And equally, when the child has to pay attention to the parent or the teacher, they are listening so that they can learn. So it's an interactive process.
Completely. Yeah. Really, really important to have that undivided, let's say, attention. So for any small amount of time, and again, maybe in a teacher context, it's obviously quite difficult with a class of X how many pupils, but maybe even from a parent capacity, that undivided attention, as you mentioned, linked away from technology, because that's obviously a massive phenomenon at the moment. You mentioned on the be kind aspect, Aileen, something that came to me there was it's a website, but it's obviously a business. It's called the Big Life Journal. And so it's something I do with lots of both kids and teenagers. And it's basically a book, obviously a journal, that has lots of different activities. So they can do bits of colouring, and it's very much built around self-confidence. So self-worth, kind of building self-esteem, learning core valuable principles about giving back, about the environment, about helping people. And so there's a very strong underlining tone, and activities like that are really important during maybe the summertime of things to still do and things to still read, but also linking in with that giving back nature that we mentioned is really, really valuable.
Yes, and I suppose linking in with that, Una, I'd just like to talk next about, you know, relationships, whether it's family relationships or friends, because that's a huge area. That's a huge step from children being at home At home, children are learning because their parents are their first teachers. And then they move to a school situation. So they move to a situation where they are one of a number of children. It's like teaching your own child in the sitting room. Now, if you put 30 children into your sitting room with that child, your child will be learning in a completely different way. So it's for parents to help children, to support children in that. And for me, there are 3 phrases which are very important. Please, thank you, and I am sorry. I suppose the please is the appreciation. It's the appreciation that we're not entitled to everything, that we are given lots of things. And it's even like an exercise that's lovely to do is stand in the shower and think of all the people who have helped make this possible. You know, the man who made the tiles, the man who painted the ceiling, the man who made the plastic. Where did the water come from? And that leads then to thank you. And it's a sense of respect. It's respect for yourself, but it's more respect for others. And finally, the last one, I'm sorry. We're all human. We all have good days. We all have bad days. We all have times when things don't go right for us. And I used to always say to the children in school, you know, it's not what you ask me. It's how you ask me and when you ask me. Because teachers are human, parents are human. But the important thing is, as a parent or as a teacher, as anybody who's caring for children, the important thing is to say, I am sorry. Because they say that 75% of the hurt goes away. And it's like the phrase, monkey see, monkey do. If you show children how to behave, that's how we learn. You know, really, as I was going through my teaching career, I began to realize that words don't really teach. It's by showing. And children need role models. So people connected with children, show them what to do. Be a role model. And show them that you are like anybody else and you make mistakes. And the important thing too for parents of children is to have time for themselves, to be kind to themselves, because you can only give what you've got. And I hear a lot of parents today saying, oh, I'm guilty. I hadn't the time to do that. And really, parents are doing so much. As I said earlier, parents are doing so much for their children. They really are. That they need time for themselves. It's based on the 80-20 rule, that parents actually need 20% of the time for themselves. And to say to children, this is my time. Yeah. You have your time with your friends. I need my time with my friends. And to show the children the respect and say, you have respect for my time and I'll have respect for your time. So there's give and take.
Really, really important. And as you mentioned, I suppose actions over words are a very old proverb. I suppose really those actions always speak louder than words anyway. So if we're in any, I suppose, walk of life, we need to show rather than really tell. So it's definitely, it's a very, I suppose, really important trait that we have as human beings, that we can communicate and deliver messages really without speaking. You know, so it's really important that we can try and show rather than tell. And as you mentioned there about from a time capacity, Aileen, there's a really interesting book that I do now with some of the kids. I think it's How Full Is Your Bucket. I can't remember now who wrote it at the moment, but I can put the link up. And basically what it is that You keep refilling your bucket, or you can fill other people's buckets by paying compliments, by being nice, as you mentioned there, by saying you're sorry, or saying please, or saying thank you, or doing nice things for others. And again, it's I suppose a kid's book, but that applies to all of us. So if you've holes in the bucket, the water isn't going to stay in the bucket. So we need to refill the holes first before then we can help fill the bucket and fill other buckets. So it's really, really important that we can't give to others what we don't have ourselves, as you mentioned. So if our bucket is non-existent, or we don't have any bucket at all, we have to go about getting the bucket back, hopefully. And we can do that by various different aspects. But there's lots of different, I suppose, core attributes that kids can learn in some format, in a book format, or lots of different things, to help teach those core principles that you mentioned of I'm sorry and thank you, and those aspects.
We had a lovely, that just reminds me, Una, of a lovely little activity that we had at school.
Yeah.
And we had 3 little emojis. We had a happy, we had a sad, and we had a red cross face.
Okay.
And when the children used to come in, sometimes we'd pick them up and we'd give the children. I was very blessed. I had a small group of 15 children in my class. It was a country school. So we'd take the opportunity and you'd pick up the emoji that suited you and you just say how you felt. And if it was somebody that had caused something for you to be upset during playtime, it was a simple, I'm sorry. And very often with children don't need to see somebody being punished. All they need is to be acknowledged that it's a hurt. And I often noticed in the schoolyard when a little girl came up to me and said, Mary pinched me, Mary knocked me, and we bring over the child. And once the child said, yes, I did pinch her, yes, I did knock her. And you say, well, what have you got to say? And the child said, I'm sorry. Before they came to the end of I'm sorry, the little girl was gone. Because it was as if that was wrong, and I just want somebody to acknowledge that it was wrong. And that's the end of it. They're gone playing, because they haven't time, they have to go playing then.
Completely, really, really important. Acknowledgement, really, and that's all we seek for anyway. You know, if we're older in a work context and somebody did something or somebody said something about you, that's all we want, is for people to acknowledge your wrongdoing and try and somewhat take accountability and responsibility for it. You know, and they're core valuable principles that can be taught in school, can be taught at home, and definitely during this summer period, hopefully, as people kind of merge back out and kids maybe meet up. They happen all the time, you know. So as you mentioned there, the pinching or the falling over, they happen on a regular basis. And it's just, I suppose, managing and handling those situations in the best way forward helps with the child's development.
Yes.
Really, really important. Any other insights or any other advice, Aileen, that you'd like to share with us today?
I suppose the other thing would be just a clean environment to help children to keep their space clean.
Yeah.
It's decluttering, which helps. I really believe that if you create a space, you allow new ideas to come in, and you know, to separate the action from the child. For example, you have a messy room rather than you are messy. And you can deal with a messy room. And also the idea of space. We often hear children talking about being bored. And what I think about that, I said, that's great. Say, yes, that's okay. Don't say anymore. Just leave the space. And children are so inventive that the mind, they'll find something to do. And they will fill their space. And it empowers children to allow children to fill their own space.
Completely. Yeah, really, really important. I suppose two very vital aspects there from a space capacity. You know, when I suppose as we look at visually clutter, our brains can get cluttered. So
Yes,
it's really, really important to, let's say, have, where possible, a separate, let's say, teaching environment, or when they're doing their homework, that they don't do it in their bedrooms. And something that's come up over the last few weeks, actually, with kind of the school term coming to a close, is that both, I suppose, mainly for secondary, but there's some are primary, that they're all keeping their school books either at the bottom of the bed, or, you know, visible still in the bedroom. And I suppose it's sometimes often not feasible, and I totally understand that. But even under the bed or in the wardrobe, kind of limiting that clutter and limiting also looking at it for that amount of time, I think is an important aspect that's come up. Because I suppose in any environment we need room and we need space in general. So it's a definite decluttering process that some need to take place, and no better time to do it, and some are just declutter and get rid of everything.
yes, yes. I always think of a specific child at school who used to his mother said he's put all his school books into his school bag, and then the bag would be hidden until ready to go back to school. And I think that is fantastic because it's out of sight, out of mind. And then to use the summertime as different learning experiences.
Completely.
You know, whether you go for a walk in the woods, whether you go to the seaside, out in the front garden, on a wet day, even playing a game of Ludo with your children for a half an hour. Ludo is a fantastic game because you have all the different experiences of life in Ludo. I mean, when we used to be playing Ludo in school, you'd have the one child who'd be trying to move 3 spaces instead of 2, and the fun in catching him doing that, and making a little deal with somebody. I won't send you home if you don't send me home. All these are all experiences that can be fun, and parents have values, and you can pass on your values to children in very simple ways. Even lying on your back in the garden and looking up at the clouds and having fun. And what picture do you see?
Really, really important. And alternative ways, as you mentioned, different ways of learning, word searches, jigsaws, interactive, but in a different format. So it doesn't always have to be school book orientated. It can be definitely different alternative ways of brain development, to keeping that brain functioning, which is really, really important. It's definitely suggested not to, let's say, switch off for that period of time. But it's definitely to try and do alternative ways of weighing things if you do bits of baking, so you're getting in measurements, or those type of aspects we'd highly recommend. And from a reading capacity, Aileen, I know this is something we've spoken about a lot. What would be your suggestions, let's say, to prepare for going back to school in relation to a reading context?
In relation to reading, I would, from my experience, I would have noticed that the children who had a love of books, actually, it didn't matter so much about how they could read. I remember one little girl who found reading difficult, but when we opened up the books in school, her face lit up. When I said, we're going to take some time out now for silent reading, her face lit up. And one day I remember taking her aside and asking, because my experience generally with children who have reading difficulties, they don't want to see the books. They want to put away the books. So this little girl really intrigued me. And she told me that on a Sunday afternoon, herself and her mammy went into the good room. In the country, you see, you'd have the good room. They were from a farming background. And the two of them, you sit and read their books. And it was time that she spent with her mammy on her own. So it was the feeling that she associated with that gave her the love of books. And for some children, it's for some little boys, it might be a book on tractors or a catalogue on tractors. So it's not even the reading, It's the book or the child in, as I say, it was a country school in a country background, the farmer's journal, looking at the cattle and flicking through with daddy and picking out the different type breeds of cattle. It's the feeling that goes with the activity.
Completely. Really, really important. And I suppose we've such a wide variety now of books and different formats and, you know, for all different age groups, that we just have a wealth of knowledge. So it's really important, I suppose, to hone in on the hobbies and the interests, as you mentioned, you know, if they're based in the countryside, linking in maybe with that side of things of tractors or of cattle. Obviously that genre doesn't suit everybody. So it's really, really important, I find, from any of the kids or the teenagers, that they have a choice, is what we linked into already. Like, would you like this book or would you like this book? But also that they have some kind of keen enough interest in it. So if they're interested in horses or they do lots of horse riding, something along those lines, you know, or football or those type of things. So trying to develop reading in that capability helps improve their interests then.
And as you said, Una, it's to do with your interest, which is to do with passion. And very often, if a parent has a certain passion, the children will follow that. Or we can always remember the teacher who gave us a love of maybe something like history because they had a passion for it themselves. So it's very important to follow your passion.
Absolutely. Yeah, really, really important. And as you mentioned, in with, I suppose, different aspects and different levels of reading, I suppose the growth at the moment, because we're so fortunate with, I suppose, a pro side of technology is all the audiobooks. So I think something that has taken off an awful lot over the last while, and lots of authors and David Williams and all of those have been reading out their books as well online, which is such a fabulous thing. So it doesn't always have to be a traditional form of open a book and start reading or reading silently. It can be listening or hearing books being read can also help improve that development.
Yes. And I suppose, Una, when you're using the technology in the book, it's nice to have the support of somebody beside you when you're doing it, so that it's not very often an activity that you find difficult. It's nice to have somebody beside you to support you and scaffold you as you are doing it.
Completely. Yeah, really, really important that there's that element of support there, and then they can vocalize, I've had enough now at the end of that page, or I'm stuck on that word, and you kind of build up that dynamic, which is really helpful. I think the sitting away or possibly in another room and just doing elements of silent reading is good up to a point, and then depending on the age and depending on the learning abilities, obviously, but maybe for kids or for any of us that maybe don't have a massive love for reading, it's important that there's that support unit there, either in a school environment or as a parent environment at home would be really valuable. Any last minute tips, Aileen, that you'd have for us today, or any other words of wisdom?
I suppose, Una, just a final advice would be just to say, pay attention to your children and be kind to yourself and be kind to others. And finally, have fun.
Yay.
Yeah. And just for the children and teachers over the summer holidays, to enjoy the holidays. And as you said earlier about choice, you know, holidays are a time to break with routine, because going back to school, they would be going back into routine. But it's nice to take a break and to do what makes you feel happy, because at the end of the day, it's about being happy. And to parents then, when they get a chance to have their holidays with the children, to be happy and to appreciate what we have around us and to enjoy what we have now.
Definitely. And as you mentioned, fun, you know, fun is a really, really core aspect. We all need fun, no matter what age we are. That can be various different forms of what we call fun, and everybody obviously has their own thing of what fun might be for them. But bits of that are really important, not only in the summer context. Obviously, we kind of maybe associate more fun in the summertime, but it's the whole year round. We need elements of fun and enjoyment and things that we like doing to be brought in where possible, really, to everyday life. But obviously, majorly from a kid's development perspective, fun is a core aspect for them. So beach and hobbies and sport and all of those type of things are really, really important.
And to remember that every opportunity is a learning opportunity, and we learn best when we are having fun.
Yeah. And probably with people, you know, so
And with people.
we learn so much, as you mentioned, about actions and words. We learn so much off of others in indirect experiences. You know, that could be a small gathering. I know there isn't many parties going on for kids, but we learn so much through those interactions that it's really, really essential to validate those experiences, and that they're not, you know, wasting time or anything like that. They're still really vital to learn and develop. Great. Listen, Aileen, thank you so much. You know, really, really useful today of some tips and advice we have for both parents and for kids, but also for teachers and maybe people in the school learning environment for how best to kind of prepare over the next kind of few weeks for whatever might face us down the line of going back into schools and different educational institutions. And we will take any questions, any comments, so feel free to message me directly or put them in at the bottom of the video, and I'll hopefully follow back up with you. Great. Stay tuned for our next videos. As we mentioned, we'll have Alwina on for physical literacy in a few weeks, and we'll have a few others. So stay linked up, and I'll hopefully speak to you all soon. Aileen, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Una.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye now.